Hello everyone, this is part 38 of What If Naruto Passed the Genin test, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. The garrison can't hold out with less than 400 ninja, said one of the men gathered around the long wooden table. His white and silver robe, identical to the 9 other robes gathered in the room, signified him as one of the water's chief tactical advisors. There are just too many people to defend otherwise. Mizukage-sama, it's a good move to relocate most of the country's non-combatants into Kiri itself, but if we're going to properly defend 30,000 people, in a city built to hold 20,000, we need more men. A half dozen or so wooden tables filled the large rectangular room, and each table was occupied by an average of 4 or 5 people. At the table nearest the back of the room stood the recently appointed Mizukage. His tall frame, DRD in a long white and blue cloak, was leaning over a particularly large and detailed map of the continent. He rested his hands on the edge of the table and glanced up to look between the table's other 6 occupants. I told you, he said in a voice far too young, deep, and strong for anyone claiming to be a Kage. We don't have them to spare. How many times have I warned all of you that if we don't do as Orochimaru says, we'll be wiped out? The Mizukage looked up, his youthful face creased with lines of worry. Naruto, standing invisibly in the corner of the room and listening to 10 conversations at once, guessed the man couldn't have been older than 25, or perhaps like Tsunade he used genjutsu to mask his true age. So you'll obey Orochimaru even though it may cost us everything? Growled one of the advisors. Sir, with all due respect, it would be lunacy to try and defend 30,000 people with 200 ninja while you take the rest of the army and move against Tsuna. While I agree that it would be best to finish off the wounded sand, we don't have the manpower to go from there and defend ourselves properly against the fresh leaf troops. Why is it, asked the Kage calmly, that whenever anyone says, with all due respect, they really mean, kiss my ass? Now listen, if we don't move as Orochimaru tells us to move, then we forfeit his protection and allegiance, and Orochimaru doesn't take kindly to treachery. He doesn't need armies to wipe us out, he'll just come here personally with his monster and then we're all screwed. What are you waiting for, Kit? Asked Kyuubi impatiently. The Mizukage, his advisors, and half of Kiri's commanders are right here and we could K them all in one attack. It doesn't get more opportune than this. I want to hear this, Naruto responded quickly. I want to know what the Mizukage is so afraid of. Do you think he means your vixen? Asked Kyuubi. Maybe, if he says Orochimaru has a demon, then I'll know he means Ino, but if Orochimaru has some kind of secret weapon then I want to know what it is. If he had one he'd have used it already. Unless it was a last-ditch effort he wanted to keep hidden until the bitter end. What of the old alliances? Asked one of the advisors. Orochimaru may pay well, but money and his promises of glory are of no use if we're all less. Go to Konoha, sir. For Kiri's sake, ask for help against Orochimaru. The leaf may be willing to forgive if we show that we are truly penitent. Our pride is worthless if we're all lying face down in a pool of blood. Kyuubi chuckled in Naruto's mind. He has no idea. Indeed, said Naruto impassively. His thoughts sounded almost troubled. The Mizukage stood up straight. You know we can't do that. We declared war on Konoha and attacked their Hokage. If we surrender then it's over. Konoha will place such heavy sanctions, tariffs and regulations on us that Kiri will collapse. It will be the same as losing a physical battle. And if we don't surrender then we will be destroyed, shouted another advisor, drawing the attention of the entire room on himself. Mizukage-sama, it would be better to surrender and throw ourselves on Konoha's mercy than to fighting them. Perhaps we could even win back the Leafs and the Sand's favor if we allied with them and fought with them against Cloud and Sound. You're lucky I don't throw you out of the village for that kind of treasonous idea, the Kage interrupted tersely, his mood as dark as the dimly lit room. If we surrender then Orochimaru will come here himself and manifest his demon. If that happens, no one will be able to stop him. It's better that we fight with him in hopes of winning rather than throw any chance we have to the wind. Manifest his demon. Naruto wondered as the two men began to argue over whether or not Kiri should ally with Konoha. An odd way to refer to your vixen for sure, noted Kyubi. But what else would he mean? I'm not sure what else he could mean. Alright, I've heard enough. The Mizukage groaned and sat in a chair, sinking into the plush cushioning, completely unaware of the invisible figure looming behind. Gentlemen, said the Kage. I realize I'm much younger than almost any of you here, but frankly, I am the Kage and I am the head of this village. The last time I listened to all of you, my esteemed advisors, the Kage didn't hear the masked metallic ring as a sword slid from a sheath. I made this deal with Orochimaru because he promised to line your purses with money and power. He lined yours too, shouted one of the men in the white and silver robes. Don't act like your hands are clean in this. We may have advised you to make the deal with him, but ultimately the decision was yours. I know, said the Mizukage in an exasperated sigh. I know, but we don't have a choice. We have to stand with Orochimaru. He never finished his sentence. With a dull thud and a crack, a long golden brand, burning with red chakra and boiling like molten metal, burst through the back of the chair, into the Mizukage's back, and now protruded from his sternum. Blood pulsed erratically from the wound as the man's slashed heart spat and heaved in desperate spasms. Everyone in the room leapt to their feet as the Mizukage's scream sped from his tea and a wicked laugh rumbled from behind the victim's chair. Naruto's layer of invisibility boiled away like flaking paint in the face of the red chakra that now burned around him like an aura. Two red tails of the demonic energy swirled into existence behind Naruto and thrashed around with a will of their own. Naruto, grinning maniacally to terrify all those present, sped his sword from the Kage's back and chair and fiercely kicked the piece of furniture. The Mizukage's corpse toppled to the ground where blood ran freely from the gaping hole in his chest. The fiery ninja sped forward with blinding speed and hacked at one man's en. The victim's head rolled from his shoulders and plopped onto the ground before his white-robed body had even shuddered from the blow. Naruto landed on one of the many tables as the room erupted into chaos. He bellowed, catching sight of one of the, obviously, more seasoned Genin in the room performing a frenzied series of seals. The Kiri ninja disappeared in a flash of gore as a red explosion of chakra, right in front of his face, sped him to pieces. Call the guards, shouted a ninja. We're under. The nin disappeared in a column of white-hot chakra that burst from Naruto's hand. The demon-powered Naruto charged forward with fiery hands and lashed out like a viper at the still dumbstruck ninja in the room. Before any had time to register exactly what was going on, less than 3 seconds since the Mizukage was skewered, Naruto had attacked again. A Genin in a green mask found himself hoisted up in the boy's deathly GS. He screamed for only a second before his body burst into flame. Naruto discarded the burning corpse and whirled on another nin approaching him from behind. A third tail burst from his lower back and Naruto disappeared in a blur of speed, just in time to dodge a pillar of boiling water the nin had spat at him. The nin didn't see the red demon as it snapped him in two at the waist with a whip of its ethereal tail. Two of the advisors, their robes flailing wildly, rushed to the room's large double doors, and pulled frantically at the handles. The door creaked but didn't budge. Behind the two, the screams of terror-filled and ninja echoed about in the room. Explosions, crackling shots of lightning, sprays of superheated water, and supersonic kunai flew about the room and shook the foundation of the complex. It's jammed, shouted one of the advisors. Silence settled over the room. A single drop of liquid splashed down in a puddle, shattering the quiet. Oh, don't be so hasty, growled a deep voice from behind the two men. They both turned and saw the figure of a man wreathed in an opaque armor of crimson chakra standing before them. Behind it, its tails began thrashing about and tore at the walls and floor. The floor was soaked in blood that ran from the 30 mutilated corpses and pulled in the crevices torn the marble. One corpse, mutilated beyond recognition, was skewered on a high chandelier and sped blood onto the floor. I went to special lengths to make sure no one could get out before the finale. Spare us, shouted the man on the right, his voice quaking. Nope, scoffed Naruto, lunging forward and pinning the man to the wall with a red claw of energy. Ah, please, please, cried the second man, half sobbing with fear. He clutched his hands in front of him. Please what? Naruto growled, wrenching the claw from the S-man's stomach and letting the body drop. It fell to the ground with a pitiful SM. Don't kill me, he begged, dropping down to his knees, staining his robe in the standing blood. I have a wife and a daughter living at home. My son's wife is expecting a child any day now and, please don't K me. Life's a real tragedy, said Naruto. At least yours is over. The ninja reared back in a flash and swept forward. His sword struck the man in the skull and passed out of his body through his groin, too fast to allow the bone to splinter. The two halves of the corpse fell in opposite directions to the floor. Now for the real work, growled the ninja, raising his left palm and pointing towards the ceiling. Naruto's hand jerked under the pressure as a beam of red energy burst from his palm and sped through the ceiling, flying into the air with a sizzling glow and carrying with it flaming bits of debris. The torrential rain began to flood through the gap as Naruto looked up when he heard a scream above him and saw his flare had burned through 6 levels of the complex before reaching the open sky. Along its course, some unlucky fool had been in the flare's path and lost a limb or two. Naruto walked to the door and kicked it as 2 of the 3 demonic tails faded away. The wood splintered in a flurry of debris and fell open on broken hinges. The buzzing and shrieking of alarm bells sounding all throughout the complex poured into the room and Naruto could tell Kyuubi was smiling. This was wondrous, Kit. I haven't seen carnage like that in far too long. You did decently yourself, responded Naruto, his voice colorless. Snapping a nin in half with your tail like that was impressive. I didn't know you could actively control your chakra without my direct consent. Don't make me blush, the demon said with no lack of cynicism. I have a small say in everything done with my chakra now, just get to it. Naruto nodded in agreement and pressed his hands together. In a large puff of ninja smoke, no less than 50 shadow clone Narutos, each one with fiery red eyes and deeply carved whisker marks exploded into existence and glared at him. Some snarled feral smiles while others paused quietly for instructions, but each one was ready and waiting. You know the drill, said Naruto, his chakra armor fading as his voice returned to normal. Destroy everything and K everyone in the complex. Then move out into the city. The clones nodded and quickly charged away. A few went out the door Naruto had kicked open, but most jumped up to higher levels of the complex via the hole blasted up through each of the ceilings. Naruto stood for a moment, and soon heard screams tearing through the building, just as loud as the alarms. This is fun, Kit, Kyuubi rumbled. I can see everything your clones are doing and I love it. I'm glad you're enjoying the display, said Naruto, uncaring as he rushed out the open door into the hallway beyond. There was no one in sight, but the cage Genin quickly spotted a trio of corpses lying face down on the floor a few meters away, work of his clones no doubt. The copies are tearing into everyone mercilessly. One of them just hacked one the Mizukage's aides across the chest. Her office is a wonderful spatter of gore and blood, and another just incinerated a Chunin. These Kirinin are pitiful. They're completely off guard and nearly defenseless. Just don't let it all distract you, said Naruto, spotting a woman peeking out of an open door. She was horror-struck and immediately darted back inside the room upon spotting him. The door slammed shut and Naruto heard a heavy bolt locking it securely. We've still got a lot of work to do. Naruto rushed up to the door, leaned back and kicked it open, spinning the bolt from the stud in the wall with a loud crack. He didn't even bother to look for the woman inside the finely decorated office, but just pointed his hand at the center of the room. A sphere of demonic energy erupted from his palm and collided with the plush carpet, exploding in a tremendous ball of fire. As he turned and ran from the building, Naruto heard the woman scream, but he knew he didn't need to go back. The fire had engulfed the office quickly and cut off her only escape route. Outside was utter chaos. S-boss lined and clotted the sides of the streets, soaking inches into the sopping mud as the rain continued to cascade from the sky and further dilute the muck. The refugees had been absolutely unprotected against his onslaught. Fires had already begun to burn in almost every building surrounding the Mizukage's complex and the sounds of screams were everywhere. Naruto walked calmly outside and surveyed the work as Kyuubi laughed with utter thrill. Where are all the Kiri ninja? Asked Naruto. Surely 50 simpleton shadow clones didn't wipe them all out. Of course not, Kit, Kyuubi said. But the Kiri ninja are playing just as you predicted. King the Mizukage was cutting off the head of the snake, and now the enemy don't have anyone to take orders from. My guess would be that they're trying frantically to organize and get the people to some kind of shelter, easy targets. Of course, sighed Naruto in a manner similar to a student who just found his own oversight on a simple math problem. I suppose it The ground rumbled and shook as a massive explosion rocked the city. Naruto glanced up and to the south as he saw an enormous pillar of smoke, fire, and debris plume up into the sky through the rain, carrying with it large chunks of rock that had formerly belonged in Kiri's wall. Looks like the sisters got their act together, said Naruto, looking away from the explosion and pressing his hands together. So the war has finally begun in earnest. Naruto flashed with red chakra. A cloud of ninja smoke exploded from him and enveloped nearly everything within a dozen yards of the ninja, but the wind and driving rain quickly whipped the haze away, revealing the clones. There couldn't have been less than 100 of them, every single one burning with red chakra and growling through clenched teeth. Naruto didn't say a word, but the clones each jumped away and sprinted down the city streets, one hand clenching a sword and the other sizzling with a readied burst of chakra. So many clones, noted Kyuubi. There won't be any left for you. Oh well, the clones will act as shock troops and S-bombers, coupled with my strike force they will be more than capable of breaking this city down to nothing. Naruto said quietly. There's no need for me to exert myself king insects like this when I can just sit back and let your infinite chakra do the job. And you don't seem to mind. Absolutely not. It is my chakra so I can see everything they do and if you want to turn control of them over to me I'd be happy to clean this up even faster. Knock yourself out, said Naruto as another explosion rocked the ground. He turned to the west to see another huge cloud of soot and rock flying up into the sky, a second breach. Just don't kill any of my men. Whatever, growled the demon. Just give me control. Hurry up. I haven't had a chance for some real fun in ages. Just remember that I have to watch all this too. Naruto sighed and formed yet another seal. Without any smoke, but in several dozen flashes of red chakra 90 more clones, these even more feral than the rest, appeared. They all snarled and huffed in deep breaths, spewing bloody vapor from between the sharp teeth and glared all around with wild, scarlet eyes. Deep trench-like marks were torn into their cheeks and flickered with sparks of light. The clones, all on one unspoken order, burst into motion, sprinting around corners, through doors, and down side streets. How much chakra did you give them? Asked Naruto. Those clones look more like you than me. Kyuubi laughed wickedly. If you were to use as much of my energy as each individual one of them has, you'd vomit from the exertion. These clones are going to have only one thing they want, blood, and copious amounts of it. They'll butcher and kill and destroy for the mere joy of it. But don't worry, I'll keep them away from your ninja. Another wave of clones appeared in a burst of flame, 100 more ready for the fight. SC. The old man breathed heavily, despite his best efforts to conceal his terror as he hid in the dark beneath the stairs of his two-level home. His wife, a woman looking to be in her middle 50s, crouched beside him. They heard the sirens begin to go off several minutes before and had immediately run down into their basement for shelter, rather than looking for a ninja to escort them to a bunker. Given the screaming and explosions outside, they both guessed it had been the right decision. They huddled together, not saying a word but holding each other tightly as the old man's breathing began to become labored and his face reddened in the gloom. The woman looked up to him, worried, but he just smiled, deepening the lines on his weathered face. Taki, hissed the old woman, terrified. Can you breathe? The man instinctively clutched his chest, still taking in deep, rasping breaths. I think I'll be fine, love, he whispered in a dry voice. It's nothing. Do you need your medicine? She said. There was very little question in her voice once she saw just how her husband struggled. Don't be silly, said Taki, his aged face looking at her with worry even as his chest rolled. Stay here where it's safe. Taki, you need your medicine. Her voice was level. It's only in the kitchen. The old man wasn't going to argue. He knew she was right, but he couldn't let go of her hand even as she stood up. It's too dangerous, he whispered, trying to sound much stronger than he was. I'll only be away a minute, she smiled, squeezing his hand. Amita, he said in a labored and fearful tone. I love you. The woman's eyes sparkled. Even after 50 years of marriage, her heart still jumped every time he said that. She never really had grown past the teenage dating stage of their relationship, and she never wanted to. I love you too, Taki, she said, leaning forward and kissing his forehead. Moving more quickly than a woman her age should have been able to, Amita stood up and half walked, half jogged around their staircase and began climbing the steps as fast as her weakening legs would allow. The sound of explosions outside, combined with the driving rain on the roof and walls, was still a constant drum line as she raced from the hall into the kitchen. Amita looked out the window above the sink for a quick glance around the couple's front yard. By the gods, she gasped as she caught sight of no less than 20 corpses, some charred black, others cut nearly in two, but all very scattered about the lawn. What kind of beastly people could do this kind of crack? Amita whirled around to her left as the front door flew off its hinges and slammed into the parlor wall. A dark shape rushed into the house as she screamed in fear. The black figure turned and glared at her with crimson eyes. It ran towards her. Amita dropped to her knees in utter horror as the shape sprinted past her. She turned as a choking gargle filled the room. The figure, who she could now tell was a ninja in a black cloak, had slammed his sword into the chest of another ninja, this one in light green. The victim gasped and fell from the end of the assailant's sword to the kitchen floor in front of the large kitchen window he'd entered through. The Kiri insignia on his stomach was now stained red. Now, said the living nin. I could have sworn I saw someone else in here. He turned to face Amita, who had scooted back and pressed her shoulders into the corner of the room. She was desperately clutching a small bottle. Please, she begged. Please, why can't you just leave us alone? Because you have to, said the ninja, his jagged blonde hair swaying in the current of his red chakra as he walked up in front of her. But what did we do to you? She cried. Blame your leaders. The ninja laughed. Amita was too frightened to resist as the nin reached down and picked her up off the ground by the N. His fingers dug into the F of her tea, drawing droplets of blood as her feet left the floor. She gasped, and dropped the bottle, which fell to the ground and shattered with a tinkling crash, spitting a liquid content all over. Her fingers locked around his wrist as she tried to pry herself loose. The ninja laughed. Red energy flashed in his eyes as the marks on his cheeks deepened. I'm having far too much fun. Let her go, screamed a deep voice. The ninja in black turned just as a heavy wooden walking stick came crashing down on his forehead. A crack filled the room as the staff shattered into pieces and the ninja's skull broke in beneath the blow. His hand released Amita, who fell to the ground in a heap with a thump. The ninja disappeared in a puff of smoke. Amita, wheezed Taki, dropping the broken cane and sinking to his knees by his wife. Amita, are you all right? Taki, she whimpered, grabbing hold of her shin. I think I broke something. The bastards, he gasped, clutching his chest but not looking away from her. You're safe now, he won't bother us again. Guess again, yelled a wickedly pitched voice from the doorway. None of you can escape me. Amita and Taki turned and saw the same ninja, or one who looked just like him, spiky blonde hair, red eyes, and a black cloak, standing in the doorway of their home. He held up his hand and a crimson sphere of energy began to burn and swirl in his palm. Just go away, screamed Amita as Taki crawled defensively in front of her. Have it your way, no fun at all, said the demon-possessed clone, turning and walking from the house, the glowing orb of energy still crackling in his hand. What? Gasped Taki, collapsing to his hands and knees, rasping for air. Taki, Amita nearly screamed, dropping down beside her husband. Taki. The couple looked up as a screaming wind filled the room. The red ball of energy flew through the open door and dropped to the ground just in front of Taki and Amita. The house's walls exploded outwards in a shower of brick, fire, and debris, as the roof incinerated almost immediately in the blaze. Naruto's clone just sprinted away towards the next house on the street. All but 2 or 3 of any of the other houses in sight were either ablaze, piles of rubble, or some combination of the two. A nearby apartment complex had been reduced to a smoldering ruin and the sky was utterly choked with smoke and rain. I feel sorry for whoever has to count all these boss, thought the clone, sidestepping a literal pile of 6.5 boss. Identical mounds of corpses or parts thereof were filling the streets and lining the sidewalks. SC. Get away, you bastard, the woman screamed, her blue eyes streaked with furious tears. She rushed out of the living room, away from her husband's body and the invading ninja in black, throwing herself in a nearby doorway. The sound of an infant screaming tore through the house as the woman positioned herself between the assailant and her child. With electrical power cut off to nearly the entire city by the invasion, the couple of 11 months home had truly become a hellish scene. Blood spattered the walls of the living room. The kitchen was a twisted bramble of stray knives and utensils. The fiery ninja in the black garb, wreathed in flame and stalking towards her, completed Yamako's nightmare. She knew that she should run to preserve herself. Her husband had fallen trying futilely to hold off the ninja. And the invaders seemed to Yamako very much like a painting of hell itself. She knew it would kill her. Yamako glanced over her shoulder into the nursery as the clone neared, walking slowly to toy with her. Her son lay screaming in his cradle, crying and reaching up for the ceiling. The demonic aura was making him sick. The woman clenched the steel knife in her hand tightly behind her back. In a mindless rush of fury and instinct, Yamako whirled on the clone and charged it, raising the knife and screaming. She swiped down, eyes clenched in rage, trying to drive the knife into his heart and kill him. For her son she struck at him with all a mother's fury. The clone caught her wrist in his hand and broke it with a flick of his fingers. Yamako didn't scream but stood there staring into his eyes as tears sped from hers. She struggled even through the broken bones, trying desperately, throwing all the weight her slender frame offered down on her wrist in hopes she could even drive the tip of the blade into the ninja's shoulder. Instead the clone laughed as he twisted his hand, wrenching Yamako's wrist apart and bending the front half of her forearm it back on itself with a loud crunching as the carpals snapped away from one another. Yamako still didn't scream. Even as the ninja stepped in close, near enough that their faces were a mere inch apart and her frame brushed his, even as he smiled wickedly down at her and twisted her hand so the tip of the knife she still held pointed back at her, she didn't scream. "Leave my baby alone," the woman hissed, a viper's warning in her voice. "Do whatever you like to me but you're not going to touch my baby." The clone grinned all the wider and inched closer to her. Yamako's eyes widened in shock as the tip of the knife came to rest against her abdomen, barely touching her skin an inch below her navel through her nightgown. "I warned you," she growled, her beautiful face hardened. The clone was moving slowly closer, pressing the knife against her skin. The steel passed almost effortlessly into her, driven slowly by the clone's steady and inhuman strength, and slipped steadily deeper as Yamako's mouth dropped open. The front of her white nightgown began to run red. "You warned me," probed the clone, just as the last bit of the 12-inch blade disappeared into the woman's stomach. His chin was now resting on her shoulder, they were so close. Yamako refused to make a noise. She stood, impaled and in shock, wide-eyed and but silent. She wasn't going to give the bastard the satisfaction of hearing her scream. Even as her head spun and she fell backwards, now soaked in her own blood from the hips down, Yamako didn't scream as the clone let go of her and let her fall. She only lay silent, on her back, on the floor, with her own kitchen knife protruding from her stomach. "Now," said the clone, stepping over Yamako's unconscious body into the nursery. "Time to shut this brat up." The cradle, the source of the screaming, was covered by a draping cloth. The clone glanced over at the woman's body as the blood pooled around her, and pointed his hand at the cradle. He'd had his fun and it was time to finish cleaning up. A bolt of sizzling red chakra shot from his palm like a missile and blew the cradle apart in a flurry of fire and debris. Kiri came under our direct assault only 30 minutes ago, said Karena, glancing over towards Naruto, who stood beside her surveying what had been a middle-class home a few minutes ago. Now it was an unceremonious showcase of shattered stone and mortar. It was one of the less annihilated buildings on the block. But thanks to you, their leaders were before they realized they were under attack. The Kiri ninja were completely unorganized and easy prey for us. Naruto looked over to her impassively and saw what he thought was the first smile he'd ever seen on her lips. Granted, it was a tiny one, and it was obviously fake, but it was there. "Good," he said, his voice emotionless. "Sir," said Karena, she stopped faking the smile and frowned. "We've won. The Kiri nin are wiped out and the village is completely destroyed." "Where are your sisters?" asked Naruto. He took a step towards one building, the only one in sight that was still standing, and his boot sank a full 3 inches into the muck. Blood the color of puce gurgled up from sludgy mud. Still it rained and poured. Droned Karena, trying to remember exactly where each one had been headed and following Naruto as he walked. Alicia sent a messenger saying she had successfully retrieved Shikamaru and was escorting him out of the hot zone. "That's good," said Naruto as he stopped in front of the building. "And Trina?" She took a contingent of ninja and said she was going to clear out the tunnels beneath the city where the non-combatants were taking shelter. "You mean she was headed to the bunkers to kill all the survivors?" probed Naruto. Karena hesitated. Yes, she said, sounding sick at the word. All the thousands of them. She's probably done by now. They won't stand a chance against trained Konoha ninja, even if there are any left, continued Naruto tonelessly. The guards are in the street and all that's left are the civilians. Yes sir, said Karena. Naruto looked over to the woman and grimaced. All this bothers you. Sir, she said indecisively. You can't tell me all this king doesn't turn your stomach, said Naruto. Karena paused for a second, looking up at the building, possibly the last standing structure in the whole city. Its siding was blackened by fire, the roof was missing a quarter of its shingles, exposing the tar paper beneath, and the windows were all set in, but it was more or less intact. The sign above the door read, Kiri Children's Home. How many men do you think we lost here? Asked Naruto. Sir, Karena stammered. I don't know, but Trina took no less than 40 down to the tunnels and there were a dozen or two more running about the streets looking for hiding Kiri-nin. We couldn't have lost more than 10, and probably less than that. Your clones did almost all the work. 10 Konoha men, answered Naruto, musing. Would you say that's better than 10,000? Karena didn't answer for a moment. She thought she knew where he was going and didn't particularly want to talk about that. I understand, sir, she said. I know it's better that we lose 10 men here by doing all of this, than it is to lose 10,000 by not. That's not where I was going, said Naruto. I was just asking if you'd rather 10 men or 10,000 men. Well 10 of course, said Karena, glancing warily up at the sign above the orphanage door. I would agree with you, said Naruto, his voice somber, almost mournful. It was a wonderful act. If I could these 10 Konoha ninja and no one else from either side to end this war, I gladly would. If I could myself and no one else, I would. His voice was now unmistakably hurt and sad. Karena looked up into his eyes and saw pain. Naruto, she didn't know what to say. It sounded so genuine. But, continued the blonde ninja, that is not an option available to us. Karena, we're driven to extremes like this by bastards like Orochimaru. He gestured to the hundreds of boss, men, women and children all laying in the street, in gutters, and in the mud. Please, don't dwell on all of this death. You didn't kill these people. I didn't kill them. Even their leaders don't bear responsibility. It's all Orochimaru's fault, Karena finished his sentence, looking down into the mire. And we have to stop him before this happens again, said Naruto, putting a hand on Karena's shoulder. If we don't stop him this will happen again and again. He's not going to stop and neither can we. He's not going to feel remorse and neither can we. Understood, said Karena coldly. But the job here is finished at least. All that's left to do is gather the troops, go home, and leave this carnage for Orochimaru and his men to find, right? Not quite, said Naruto, throwing a glance to the building before them. Karena looked between Naruto and the building once, twice, and a third time before it finally registered what he meant. You mean, we need to destroy, she stopped. Every last living thing in Kiri, said Naruto. The brunette Kunoichi looked for a moment as though she might vomit, but straightened herself up and looked at Naruto, though the trembling was still in her eyes. Is it really necessary? She asked in an uneasy voice. Naruto nodded once. For no less than a minute, Karena looked around the street. It was still pouring rain and the sewers were backing up. The mud was now a sludge like soup and boss, countless corpses, each one somehow maimed or burned or otherwise destroyed beyond repair or recognition, lay in the filthy pottage. She turned her attention to the ruined skyline, or lack thereof. No building aside from the orphanage was left standing more than a single story high. Every last structure was blown out, burned out, and utterly ruined. What had been apartment complexes a dozen stories tall were now gigantic heaps of broken cement and mortar. Nothing was intact. All right, she whispered, her breath staggered as she drew out a single kunai. I'll do it myself. Interrupted Naruto, I can do it myself if you'd rather. You don't have to. No, said Karena. No, I should do this, I should. Orochimaru isn't going to stop, so we'll have to make him or he'll destroy everything. Naruto, did you know that Trina, Alicia, and myself are essentially virgins to this kind of business? Naruto shook his head. Tsunade told me the three of you had been trained for anything, said the blonde. Karena took a stee's breath. We are, she said. However, this is really the first time any of us has been called on to do anything near this destructive. Little missions can't prepare someone to do something so horrible, but I can see just how necessary it is now that we stop Orochimaru, so he can't do this to Konoha. Which is why I need to be the one to finish this. I don't follow, said Naruto. We may be called on to do more horrible things, said Kurena. And if we are, we all need to be steeled for it. We can't hesitate or show mercy, the enemy wouldn't, you've already prepared yourself mentally for the worst, but I haven't. I need to. It may cost me my soul, but that's something I'll trade to defend Konoha. Naruto fought back a grin. This battle really changed your outlook. He commented. An hour ago you would have berated your sister for talking like that. Kurena shrugged. I said we were virgins to this kind of mission. We've never been in a real war before. Seeing all of this, it has changed the way I look at things a little. Is that bad, Naruto? The caged Genin hesitated. I'm not sure anything is bad, he said. There's only what we do. Good and bad are only constructs people attach to things they do or don't like. I see. Kurena nodded, stepping up onto the porch of the orphanage and peering into the door, obviously bewildered. She saw no one. That makes sense, I guess. Or at least it makes all this a lot easier to swallow. Without another word, the Anbu Kunoichi disappeared inside the orphanage and Naruto let a grin spread across his face. And thus another pawn falls under my direct control. Naruto's grin faded, but his joy was no less real. Now all I have to do is wait a few days for Ino to show up, and from there it's all downhill to victory. This, Kit, Kyuubi rumbled, bursting into Naruto's mind, was absolutely wonderful. The carnage, the destruction, the utter and total decimation of an entire village, no feeling quite compares. Glad you enjoyed yourself, Naruto thought. You seem to be having fun with those clones. Oh yes, having the freedom of movement again to S and main was exhilarating. We must do this again sometime. We may not have to, Naruto responded. And to be honest, I'd rather not. Why? Asked Kyuubi. I want to rid the world of evil, Kyuubi, not people. Wiping out the continent isn't my aim. The only reason Kiri had to go was because it was the most convenient example to make for the other villages. Now that Kiri is wiped out, it will completely demoralize Kumo and maybe even Oto. Frightened enemies are no enemies at all, they're prisoners of war. If we can scare our enemies enough, we might not even have to K them, which would be kind of nice and save us a lot of effort. So, Kyuubi mused, you don't really buy what you told that Kurena Vixen, about how good and bad don't exist. I told her exactly what she needed to hear to do what is necessary, said Naruto, glancing up at the orphanage. She's right, this will steel her for what she may have to do later, and I don't need people unprepared to do the necessary. Remember, Kyuubi, I'm not afraid to use what some people would call evil means to accomplish what I see as good ends. I see, rumbled Kyuubi in his chuckle. Kit, you really have become quite entertaining. You're insane, but I find it all amusing. A child's scream erupted from the orphanage. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.